The following has been recorded at Cairn University. Any reproduction of this recording without the express permission of the university is prohibited.
When I talk with alumni and they express their appreciation for this university and talk about the things that made this place so special, I would say probably 100% of the time, now that's a tall number, okay, 99% of the time. 99% of the time, they mention a specific professor when they talk about why this place was special. And as you walked in this morning, you saw some of the quotes that we have collected from our alumni talking about professors who have made an impact on their lives. Now, a lot of these professors you may not even know because, as you know, Cairn is 100 plus years old, and so some of these professors have been gone for some time. Some are still here remaining with us. But the point is that for this week, when we connect with our alumni, when we try to connect you with our alumni, we want to emphasize something that really seems to bind everybody together in a very positive way, and that is the classroom and the professors and the experience that people have. I wanted to mention that you have an opportunity to tweet your professor love, as you will see here in a minute. Can we put that up there? We wanted to give you the opportunity to do this as well. Tweet your tribute to @CairnU with hashtag ProfLove and send a message about a professor now who is making an impact in your life and in your education, just as our alumni have done, and we will encourage them to continue to do throughout the week of homecoming. So, we'll emphasize today professors, the role that they have played. Hopefully have a little fun here and you'll get to see some conversation. We've collected a few student questions as well, and in one or two cases perhaps, if that student is here, we'll have the opportunity to hear from him or her directly. So, without further ado, I will step back here for the royal train of professors that we have. Please welcome our professor panelists for today, Dr. Juliet Campbell-Farrell, Professor Charlotte Gleason, and Professor Edgar Hardesty. All right, here we go. How are you all doing?
Good.
Good, okay. We will get started here. Your mics will turn on when you're actually speaking, so. We'll get right into it here. I'd like to go through each of you here. If you could tell us, first of all, what you teach, because some alumni may actually be watching this very soon, and so that's a benefit as well. They'll have the chance to see some of the profs who are here at Cairn, even if they didn't have you. What do you teach? Why do you teach here? And maybe a little bit about how you came to be here, if you could talk about that. Why don't we start to the left here with Professor Gleason. Go ahead.
So I teach education, literature, and composition courses. They range from adolescent lit to poetry to teaching English to just all realms of composition. And I ended up here. That's a good question. So my husband and I both graduated from Cairn, and we were living upstate New York, and through a series of events, I was a high school English teacher. We were going to move back, and at the time, I remember we went out to lunch with Dr. Williams at the time, and I wouldn't say that he was more interested in Jamie than he was me. I'm just going to say it how it was. I'll try not to be offended by that. But meanwhile, when we decided to move back and my husband was going to move here, and I was coming with him, I decided at the time
Naturally.
I wanted to clarify. I just had my son, and I didn't want to work full-time anymore. And so I was kind of in conversation with Dr. Marty McCullough, and she was interested in me, which I'm glad somebody was. And so I came back, and I was an adjunct for a year at Bucks County Community College, and by the end of that year, they had a part-time position, and which was kind of better than the adjunct world, and it would allow me to accommodate, children and a family, and so I took on a position. Then I was in the School of Ed, and then switched to the School of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So that's how.
Okay. So as my accent indicates, I'm not from the United States of America. I'm from the Caribbean. I'm from Jamaica. And I'm from that beautiful, warm island where many of you, after you get married, you go to visit and to have a wonderful time. So I'm from Jamaica. And what brought me to Cairn University, I came to America to study at Bryn Mawr College, where I was doing graduate work. And a part of your graduate studies is that you do a practical training. So I was living very near to Cairn University. Still, I'm living very near to Cairn University. So I opted to see if I could do my practical training at Cairn University. And there was an opportunity to serve in a part-time capacity. So I started then and then moved to a full-time capacity. So that's what brought me to Cairn University. I teach in the School of Social Work and I teach in the School of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So in the School of Social Work, I teach social work practice. I teach social policy, social work organization. I teach a couple of seminar classes. And for the School of Liberal Arts and Sciences, I teach abnormal psychology, social psychology, developmental psychology. I teach the family. And I think that's it. And recently I started teaching in the counseling, the Masters in Counseling program. I'm teaching a course around social justice counseling. So that's what I do at Cairn University. And I'm enjoying it at Cairn University. I've stayed around because of the fact that I'm able to use the academic piece of who I am with the spiritual piece of who I am, and not many persons get that opportunity. So teaching in a secular institution, I would be enjoying being an educator, but I would not be able to incorporate that with the spiritual component. And so Cairn University provides that really ideal opportunity to be able to do both. So that's why I'm here.
Dr. Hardesty, you're up.
Born in D.C., raised in Baltimore, Maryland. Ended up at Cairn because my wife and I, after some time in the military, were shopping around for a place where the Lord could prepare us for ministry. And we went to a lot of different schools. But I came to Cairn, in those days, PCB, because of the professors. I got to know several of them, and I was about 10 years older than most of the other undergrads. So the relationship was usually with older married students and with professors. Two of them in particular impacted my life, Gordon Sepperly and Dr. John Kaywood, Scott's dad. They just marked me up in a number of different ways. I was in ministry while I was at PCB, moved from there to Dallas Seminary, and I started petitioning Dr. Kaywood almost immediately upon graduation from Dallas Seminary. Hey, can I come teach? Can I have a faculty position? Is there someplace I can be? I know my grades were lousy. I know I always made the dean's other list, you know. But I love what I'm doing. I love the Word. I love the Lord. And I love the people. And I love to teach. Isn't there some place for a guy like that? 10 years later, I got a phone call followed up by a letter. Could you come and teach? And I said, well, I'm already in ministry up to my earlobes. You know, several different churches at that particular point, and I was senior pastor in a church in Baltimore. He said, well, since you're not free to come all the time, come part of the time. So I taught here 3 days a week and pastored 4 days a week. That's been going on for the last 25 years now that I've been here. And started out in the Bible department, which changed names several times, and then worked across the hall as well in a place called IJS, the Institute for Jewish Studies. That became Bible and Archaeology, Bible and Israel, and then now it's Israel and Archaeology. There's been several different components and different pieces down through the years. Meantime, I'm at Baltimore Hebrew University trying to get up to speed with Jewish studies. So what I teach here now is Bible and archaeology and Jewish studies. Pretty much the full spectrum of everything that's been available in the School of Divinity I've taught at one point or another. And in the first year programs, I'm the program director for Israel and Archaeology. Yes. Yeah. And just a short commercial, we're leaving the 1st of March for Israel. Some of you need to join us. Come see me, okay?
Great. So, as I mentioned, Professor Hardesty, soon to be Dr. Hardesty, is an alum. Professor Gleason is an alum as well. And but it's interesting to hear how each has come to this place and to hear your articulation, Dr. Campbell, of this university and why it's special to you. I think we'll talk more about that this morning. But let's get to a couple of questions that students posed. Some were to specific individuals, and so that may be, who knows, a little daunting. And others were more broad. The first one is for Dr. Campbell-Farrell. A student was interested in knowing, what was the hardest adjustment you had to make coming to the United States for an education?
Interesting question. When I came on a scholarship from Jamaica to study in the United States of America, and when I was asked where exactly would I like to study, I said to the persons who were administering the scholarship, I want to study in a place that's very warm. Because I'm coming from a place that's very warm, so I really want you to find a place which is really very similar in terms of the weather to Jamaica. And then I discovered that where I was assigned was actually very opposite to being very warm. Because the weather in Pennsylvania is certainly not very close to the weather in Jamaica. So I think that was my biggest adjustment coming to study in the United States of America. And I remember the first time it snowed, I was in New York City. And it was a very fascinating experience. It was very beautiful seeing the snow coming down and running around trying to get onto the subway. It was quite an introduction to snow. But then my second experience of it snowing was in Bryn Mawr, which is much more suburban, and I had a very different experience just watching the snow fall on the leaves, on the grass. That was really very beautiful. But a big adjustment for me was just dealing with the cold. That was really very, very hard. And for those of you who know me and who I teach in class, you'll still see that I'm still dealing with the cold. Because I'll be dressed in a very warm way, and students will say to me, Dr. Campbell-Farrell, are you cold? And I said, yes, aren't you cold? And they'll say, no. So I'm still adjusting to the cold. But I was very blessed with having a field placement when I was doing my graduate work. I had a field placement at LaSalle University, and there I met some amazing persons who recognized that if I dressed the way I was dressing, I would be very frozen before the winter was over. And so they went out and they got me very warm jackets and very warm pants, very warm socks, and kind of taught me exactly how to dress properly for the winter. So I would say that was my most difficult adjustment, but over time it became better. And then by the end of my first winter, I really loved the sight of the sunlight. Really loved it after then.
Another question that came in that I thought might be interesting. I don't know if Allison Hauser is here. Allison, are you here? We have a question, and she will actually be posing this question. This is one for Professor Gleason, so I'll hand the mic over to her. Thanks.
Hello. All right, Mrs. Gleason, having met your husband at Cairn, what advice, if any, do you have for those engaged, pre-engaged, just talking, or for any singles?
I have you in class, Allison, so payback is sweet. Just kidding, just kidding. I almost feel like you're asking the wrong, if Jamie was here, he would be laughing that you asked that question. I should probably tell you what not to do. That's probably the way, advice. So what I would say is that my mentality when I was in college was, and it was a little off, but you should have a lot of relationships. Now hear me out. I don't mean, no. I mean friendships.
The mic right now.
you should have friendships, and you should make sure that you are really establishing opposite sex friendships. I really think so. I had incredible friends who were girls, and I had incredible friends that were guys. And sometimes it may have been a little confusing to them, but that was my issue. But I really think that it's important to know someone as well as possible. My husband and I were engaged for 18 months, and it was a terrible engagement. A lot of times we're surprised we even got married. But I will say our first year of marriage was wonderful because we had hashed so much out. We had talked a lot. The engagement was, I wouldn't recommend that. It was just the way it was. But we had such an established friendship, and we had known each other in a different context. And I think the other thing I would say is that we really did not isolate ourselves. And I know you've heard that before, and you've heard that from adults, and you're like, whatever. But I think when you don't isolate yourselves, you just, I mean, what if something happens? You know, you have no one else, you've cut out everyone else. So I think it was really important that we would spend time with other people, and that we would say, hey, I'm gonna go with my friends, you go with your friends. So I would say that. And if you're engaged, that doesn't mean that doesn't give you a right to like shut everyone out either. Just because you're engaged, it doesn't mean that the world revolves around you. That sounds really unkind. I didn't mean it that way, but really, there are other people there. And there's more to life than, you know, planning a marriage. Don't turn into Bridezilla. There's a lot out there to think about. It's one day and it's important, but establish your friendships, maintain those, and don't isolate yourselves. How was that? Wow, that was a big one. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking.
Does that cover it out, Allison? Does that cover it? Another excellent student question. We got several excellent student questions. The next one is directed to Professor Hardesty. If you knew for certain, now notice the context of this question and its content as well. If you knew for certain that you would live for another 25 years, another 25, but with a renewal of...
3.
Yes, exactly. Right. Once you got your driver's license and on. Okay, if you would live for another 25 years, but with a renewal of youthfulness, what would you do with the time that you had?
Wow. Julius Bosco, when he retired, was asked a similar question. If you knew you had 5 years to live, what would you do? He said, I'd spend the first 4 preparing for that last year. When Austin Potts retired, he was asked what he'd do. He said, I'd pray more. What would I do? I'm still trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be when I grow up. Really. I've got enough things I want to do to last 5 lifetimes, easily. I don't understand people that move from one theater of operation or endeavor and then just sit. That is totally foreign to my way of thinking. I may change the venue of where I'm working, but I don't think I'd stop doing pretty much anything I'm doing right now. Put some people in front of me that want to hear the word, open a Bible, and we're ready. You can be, and some of you have experienced this already, you can be so tired you can hardly stand up. You can be sick as a dog. But when it comes time to be on, and you have the opportunity to share the Word of God, you know, Howard Hendricks used to say to us, the worst travesty you can ever perpetrate on other people in the planet is to bore them with God's Word. Passion, excitement, reading with expression, putting yourself in the text and working through that. I do that, but I have no idea what that looks like and where it would be. I like the youth part, though. You know, is there a bottle of that I can get somewhere? But seriously, you guys, I can't think of doing something with my life that I wasn't convinced the Lord was in the middle of and I wasn't passionate about. I can't imagine just living for the weekend, or 3 weeks in the summer to be able to go someplace. You know, showing up day after day, week after week, doing the same thing over and over and over again. I think it's very important that you love what you're doing and that you are deeply embedded with what you're doing and that you are convinced the Lord's in the middle of what you're doing. And it's never work at that point. It's a joy. That's why I'm here, and that's what I do.
Great. Good advice, too, for these students. Excellent. Thank you. Related to that, and another one of our excellent questions from a student is regarding challenges post-graduation. Now, all of these students are headed for graduation at some point. And one of the things students, we turn to you. Students, one of the things that we want to try to do in these chapels, as I try to connect you with our alumni, is to try to answer some of the questions that a lot of you have. And anytime you ask those questions of me or anybody else in our office, it's very helpful because we want to know how to be most helpful. I know a lot of these students are thinking about graduation and thinking about the challenges they will be facing. So why don't we start over here, maybe Professor Gleason, what was one of the greatest post-graduation challenges you faced, and perhaps, you know, how did it all work out in the end?
So I graduated, I took a class in the summer and I graduated in August, and 2 weeks later, no, actually, I got married, I got my diploma, went on my honeymoon, came back, started coaching field hockey, and then started teaching high school English. I was 23 almost, and I was teaching high school seniors and high school sophomores. So I took a lot on in about a 4-week period, which if anyone knows anything about me, I tend to take a lot on all the time. But so the greatest challenge for me was I burn out. As a matter of fact, after my first, it was a long-term sub position for 6 months, and after those 6 months, I decided that I had chosen the wrong profession and that I was not going to teach again. And we moved to New York shortly after, and I was all set with that. And I guess what I would say is, and I could hear at the time Dr. McCullough's voice in the back of my mind saying, don't ever judge your first year of teaching as your entire experience. And I guess that's what I would say is, whatever you start at after graduation, whether it's a job or whether it's looking for a job, which is exhausting and discouraging, you can't allow that to determine the rest of your career or the rest of your life even. And I know that sounds really dramatic, and the Lord, you know, really worked on me very clearly. I think I'm denser than most. And eventually, you know, a year and a half later, it took a high school principal asking me three times, 3 different periods, offering me jobs 3 times for me to realize that maybe this is what God wanted me to do. And I said no the first 2, go figure. But all that to say that I don't think you can evaluate your experiences when you start. You need to give it some time, you need to give it a year. And I would also say, don't try to take on the world. Like, I want you to take on the world. I'm excited for you to take on the world, but try to do one thing at a time. I feel like such a hypocrite. But just do one thing really well, and then branch out.
To add to that, I want to say that sometimes when students think of graduation, they are really very, very excited about wanting to get out there. And I have heard many students who have said, I wanted so much to leave the institution and to, you know, be on my own, getting a job, doing many other things, that I didn't recognize how much I was going to miss the institution and my professors. So I want to encourage you, even before you start thinking about graduation, to really use your opportunity at the institution you are as much as you can. So at Cairn University, really enjoy every minute of your time at Cairn University. Difficult assignments, lots of reading, very stressful times, but really enjoy it and really enjoy your professors and your colleagues. Because when you graduate, you're going to lose a piece of you that you have had possibly for 4 years. You're going to miss those relationships with your professors, with your friends, just even in your dorm room that you thought was just too crammed and terrible. But when you graduate, you kind of really miss some of the things that you did. So I'd really encourage you to do that. And then as you look to graduate, I know some students want to go on immediately to study, to get their, to get their master's degree. And for some, that's really the right thing to do, the ideal thing to do. If you feel the Lord is calling you to do that, then you make that kind of preparation. But there are others who the Lord might be calling to be involved in working for a while, getting some experience under your belt, and then moving on to further studies. For myself, when I graduated from Teachers College and was a science teacher. That was my first college graduation. So I graduated from Teachers College, became a science teacher. And so I went right from Teachers College into the classroom, loved it, absolutely loved teaching science, loved the experimental pieces of it, really had a great time. And then after 7 years, I decided to go back to study. But this time I was not going to be studying science, I was going to be studying social work. So when I graduated from the social work program, I really felt lost. And I felt lost because for 7 years I taught science, loved it, and then I was in a very different discipline. So what do I do now? How do I branch into the field of social work? And so that was a little bit of a challenge for me, how to make that transition. So I actually went back and taught high school science for a couple of months, and then went on to work in the field of social work for a little while. So I would say, God has a call on everybody's life, and I think the path that you take, there's no really straight path that will apply to every one of us, because we're called to walk different journeys. But I think whichever you're called to do, the important thing is to ask yourself the question, am I doing what God has called me to do? Am I at a place where God has called me to be? For some of you, it might be you graduate, and the Lord might want you to be involved with missions for a while. The Lord might want you to get involved with the world race. The Lord might want you to go live, say, in the city and to invest some time working there. The Lord might call you to a rural community to work for some time. And it might not necessarily be in the discipline that you studied. It might be something which is affiliated with the discipline that you study. But it's really important to listen to what God is saying to you and then be able to make that move. Some of you might be, like the ladies might be thinking, when I graduate, I'll get married and I will, stay home and have my children. And if that's where the Lord is leading, that also is okay. The important thing is not to be pressured into being what God has not called you to be and to walk a path that God has not called you to walk. So I would say be seeking God's direction and then follow God's leading. Invest in having really very wise people in your life, your own age group, but also invest in some of the wise men and women in your church, the wise men and women at your university, so that they can be praying for you, that you can talk with them, bounce ideas off them in terms of how to walk. And never forget this. And I can speak for my colleagues, who are with me on this panel, but also I think all your professors. We will not forget you. We love when you come by our office. We love when you send us an email. We love when you keep us up to date as to what's going on in your life. Not just for a reference, but because you want to talk to us, because we are available to you. We are kind of like your lifelong professors. We will be available to you. If you need to talk about something, if you're having problems in terms of which college should I go to, talk to us. I get called sometime at 12 o'clock in the night. My husband just came in, and he left the dishes in the sink, and I'm really so mad. That's an okay question too. And we can talk. So your professors are always available to you after graduation.
O'clock for me, not at 12 o'clock. Sorry, you can call me earlier. I'm not.
Professor Hardesty.
Well, I guess in my life, especially my married life, we've shifted gears a number of times. Each one of those transitions was clearly what we should do, but all of them difficult. I was at the University of Baltimore in business management, corporate finance. I was headed for law school when the Vietnam War really began to crank up. And halfway through my junior year, Lyndon Johnson, who was president at the time, decided I should see more of the world. And the guy down the street said, "You're on next month's list, so if you want to do something you want to do, rather than be drafted, you better make some decisions pretty quick." Long story short, 4 years in the military and 21 months in combat, and I was back in Baltimore, not finished college, no job waiting. But there was a gal that helped me through that time who was writing me letters with great regularity. I met her in September of 1969. We were engaged in November, gave her a ring in December. I got out of the military in February. We were married in June. We were going to get married in October, those long engagements, and then it became August, and then we got married in June. I was at the University of Baltimore again at night school while working during the day, and the Lord just grabbed a hold of me. While at night school, I was also working in the business community in the marketing department of what in those days was the telephone company. Now, that particular division you'd know as Verizon. All of these things have changed dramatically over the years. In marketing, was doing quite well and had been given the opportunity to present a number of new pieces of equipment and new ways of communication back when all the solid-state electronics was first cranking up. In the midst of that, the Lord shifted our gears and we started over. So at 27 years old with a 15-month-old son, and I think about $25 in my pocket, we moved to Philadelphia to start PCB. When I finished PCB, I had 187 undergraduate hours. All of the stuff from University of Baltimore transferred, but there was no business major in those days. Everyone was a Bible major. So all of that undergrad came along. Long story short, again, compressing everything from PCB to Dallas Seminary to pastoral ministry, back to PBU, and now it's Cairn, and I'm still in school. Hopefully I'll be finishing before long. My wife and I were talking the other night about all the transitions and how difficult it is to pull up stakes and move a family and live like a student for 20 years. That's an amazing concept, just thinking about it right now. To understand that you are mobile and you're fluid and you can't put down roots anywhere because you're not finished yet. And as you move into that, your family becomes very close-knit. My kids know exactly when there's a prayer need. They know what the financial situation is. They know where their food's coming from and where their clothing is. And during school time, the married couples used to get together and swap clothes back and forth. It doesn't fit your child anymore, so this one needs something right now. You never knew what clothes would show up on what kid at any given moment. We had all sorts of co-ops where we worked together as students and as couples to buy things on a wholesale level so we could afford to put decent food on the table instead of junk and things that don't promote nutrition with our children. All of that I'm saying simply to say to you, what we understand in terms of a cohort in first-year programs ought to be the experience of each one of you here. Now, you talk about the academic side and placement in terms of vocation and things of that nature, but don't miss the family relationship that you can have here as you become involved in each other's lives and you begin to see the needs and the heartaches and the joys and just the beauty of this larger family and how you can actually work together to meet one another's needs and rejoice in the Lord's goodness as all this is poured out upon you. Some come with great resources. Others come, like I did, with nothing. We need each other desperately. And with the Lord in the middle, it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing to watch develop. And I've lived that since 27. I'm 70. That's been a while. It's a marvelous way to live. It's also a little scary, but it's a marvelous way to live.
Great. Our time is just about gone here, and so, believe it or not. So we will enter into the final lightning round here. Well, I will ask, I have two questions. You get to answer the question, and you get, let's say, a maximum of 2 sentences, okay, of explanation if you desire, or you can just answer the question. After that, we'll applaud our professors, thanking them for sharing their time with us, and then I have some final thoughts for you, and then we'll be dismissed. So here we go. First question, response, and you get 2 sentences of explanation if you like. What is your favorite movie of all time, and why? We'll start over this side again.
We Were Soldiers. It brings to mind the experiences I had and how it changed my life in Vietnam.
Avatar. We saw what it's like to want to destroy a people group, but when we step into their world and become them, we see their lives from a very different perspective.
Much Ado About Nothing, because I'm an English teacher and that's what I'm supposed to say.
That's very good. Very good. Final question. If you had 1 hour of time completely to yourself, what would you do with it? We'll start over this side now, Professor Gleason.
I know I'm supposed to say read a book, but I'm not going to say that. I would walk with music and walk, and nobody else would bother me. Just, I'd be by myself.
I would take my little dog, Polo, to Core Creek Park, and we would walk along the river and just enjoy the bliss of doing absolutely nothing intellectually challenging.
I'd sneak into East York's stadium and find the furthest seat from the field and watch my grandson play goalie.
Major brownie points there, Professor Hardesty. Major. Very good. Well, students, one of the points that I hope you don't miss here, and I think this has been brought up, is that your interaction with Cairn University, which I know right now feels very full and every day, but that doesn't end when you graduate. That's one of the reasons we're doing this during homecoming week and an alumni chapel series. There could be thousands, potentially, of alumni who will see this chapel, and we hope it will make them feel like they have a little glimpse into your lives as a student. Who's teaching here at Cairn now, which is a question that they often have. Many of our alumni will be here on campus, so you'll have the opportunity to interact with a lot of them at the garden party Friday night, at the Phil Wickham concert on Thursday, during Saturday for homecoming, as all kinds of things are going on. So I'd encourage you to talk with them when you get the chance about your experience with your current professors, and I'm sure that they'll be eager to share similar stories with you as well. Let's put that Twitter thing up there again on the board. Do that today, folks, and show some appreciation for the professors like these. So we'll applaud, and you are dismissed. Thank you very much.